the requirement of the Garda Commissioner to provide information to the Minister. I respectfully suggest it tightens up the information that is to be provided to the Minister by the Commissioner. And the reason that I think that needs to be tightened up is because it's very much open to abuse in my view. And the reason that I say it's open to abuse is because I say it has been abused in the past. Now, I haven't been a TD here for very long, and somebody like Deputy Howlin, I'm sure, could point to a lot more abuses than I can point to. But I do recall one of your predecessors, actually one of the more reforming ministers for justice, and I believe he should be acknowledged and heralded for that, Alan Shatter. But he didn't, I don't think it's unfair to him or to then Deputy Mick Wallace, now MEP, to suggest that they didn't have the cosiest relationship in the world. And they were on primetime television, I think on a show called Primetime itself one night. And Mick Wallace was criticising government policy, as is the wont of opposition. And the Deputy Shatter said that he had been stopped at Five Lamps in Dublin. You may know where Five Lamps is, Minister. It's on the way up to Croke Park. It's a while maybe since either Clare or Meath were in an All-Ireland final. But, you know, we live in hope. But he was able to say that Deputy Wallace had been committed, I think it was a road traffic offence at Five Lamps, and was pulled in. Information that he had gleaned from the Garda Commissioner. Now, even perhaps equally worrying, or maybe slightly more worrying in some respects, in the lifetime of this Dáil, and indeed during your tenure as Minister for Justice, you may recall that the then Vice President of the European Commission attended a golf dinner of the Oireachtas Golf Society, as it was called, in Clifton. It was terrible consternation. A couple of journalists basically told the world they were Woodward and Bernstein for their efforts in unearthing the seating plan, and all hell broke loose. And the hysteria that we're now seeing around RT was in the ether. And no less than Phil Hogan's head was going to satisfy the masses. And then it transpired that he had been apprehended in a road traffic offence. Now, I don't mean to denigrate road traffic offences. Road traffic offences can be very serious, and every offence is by definition serious. But it was of driving with a mobile phone in his hand, which is an offence, and a serious offence, but one that I would say does not threaten the security of the state. He wasn't apprehended, as I have said before, with a bag of Kalashnikovs in his boot. It was with a mobile phone. But this information made its way, I understand, to you, Minister, and you, I understand, and of course I'm not in Cabinet and we're all bound by, but I understand it made its way to Cabinet. Now, of course, it greatly assisted your Taoiseach, the Taoiseach, in solving their problem. So they were able to write, bolstered with this information of this alleged offence that a Vice President of the Commission had carried out of driving with a mobile phone to his ear. This was dynamite, this offence. I mean, this was greater than this was almost up there with the arms trial back in the day, the amount of attention it got. And Ursula von der Leyen, who was President of the Commission, was written to. So I say very squarely that was an abuse of information. And abuses of information should not happen. And you've never explained how it happened, and it needs to be explained. Because if it happens once, it can happen twice. And if it happens twice, it can happen a lot of times. And it's happened twice in my very brief period in here.
I suppose, Deputy, what we're trying to legislate for here are potentially unforeseen circumstances, and to not be prescriptive in what the Commissioner may or may not deem as being necessary or relevant, and what the Commissioner, he or she, might feel is important to relay to the Minister of the day. and I suppose that is the case with a lot of legislation where we try not to be prescriptive because we don't know scenarios or situations that may arise that are not covered. What I don't want as Minister is a situation to arise, an emergency in particular, where the Commissioner then has to refer to a set of rules to try and identify whether or not they fit into a particular section or subsection or category that they're allowed to then engage with the Minister. I mean, there's a lot of trust placed in the Garda Commissioner in this legislation, and I would state that there is a lot of trust placed in the Garda Commissioner, but it is important that we trust the person who is at the head of our policing service. I do also believe that there's a lot of checks and balances. There's a lot of oversight in this bill. The Commissioner himself might say too much in terms of the role and the way in which he must engage with the board, with the authority. We will have the individual now responsible for dealing with our security. You will have the new GSOC, whatever the title is there. So there was a huge amount of oversight in making sure that the Commissioner carries out his functions or her functions to the best of his ability. But there is also professional discretion that must apply here, and we need to not constrain the Commissioner in what he or she may or may not say if they feel it is appropriate and it is something that the Minister must be made aware of. So, you know, there's a lot of insinuations and assertions in what you've suggested, but I would suggest that bad cases don't make good law, and we need to make sure that the Commissioner's hands are not tied if he or she feels that there is a matter of security or of importance that must be brought to the Minister's attention. And I don't think by setting the parameters that are here that we can predict that that would cover all possible scenarios.
Minister, there was no insinuation. There was a direct accusation that the Commissioner told you that Phil Hogan had a mobile phone to his ear and that you brought that to Cabinet and that helped end his career at the European Commission. Now, if there is oversight that would prevent that happening in the future, then show me where it is. And I'd be happy to consider withdrawing the amendment. But that is an abuse. That is political policing. It is policing in a manner that advances the political agenda of the government of the day, not the security of the state, not the security of its citizens. Yes, the prosecution of anybody who was apprehended with a mobile phone to their ear would advance security. But that wasn't what this was about. As I understand it, there wasn't even a prosecution. But that's not what this was about. This is about political policing. And political policing is very dangerous. And the possibility of political policing is even more dangerous, especially if it's legislated for. So if there is something that precludes that happening again, then show me where it is, because if it's removed, as I proposed, well, the Commissioner can still tell the policing authority in the case of an emergency, and they can tell the Minister straight away, but there's a filter. But if it's to stop the Commissioner telling the Minister of the day useful tittle-tattle, if there's nothing to prevent that, and it's happened so recently, and it happened before that, and it'll continue happening if we legislate for it, well then, I do have a problem with it, and I want you to tell me what prevents that happening, other than that we should trust the people who are exactly the same characters. It's the same Minister for Justice. It's you. It's the same Garda Commissioner. It's Drew Harris. So what? We should trust them now? We couldn't trust them before?
Simply just going to come in to reject wholeheartedly any assertions or suggestions that you have made in relation to that matter. I've clearly outlined why I won't be accepting this particular amendment. I think it's important that we don't tie the hands of the Commissioner if he or she feels it's important to bring forward information that is relevant to the Minister.
Margaret.
You brought it to Cabinet, that information. It came from the Commissioner.
No, I didn't.
I moved and regardless of that, we know that it happened before, and we know that it can happen again. I press the amendment.
So, the question now is that the amendment be made. Those in favour of amendment number 18? Those in favour?
Yes, I'm in favour.
Those against?
Neil?
Tepper and Lasso.
Vote all.
A division has been challenged. Tellers Thaw, Nachokti, Michael McNamara, Marion Harkin, Neil, Nachokti, Hildegard Nocton, Cormac Devlin. On the question that the amendment be made, thorough result, Thaw, Cuig, yes 55, Neil Octo, no 80. Shilim Gwil Butcher and Gesta.